Welcome back, everybody, to Embrace the Squiggle. Ashley and I are so excited to talk to our guest today. They are someone who knows firsthand of what it means to redefine success. She spent 35 years climbing the corporate ladder, ultimately serving in executive leadership roles focused on communications and culture for multi-billion dollar organizations. But when life presented her with a profound challenge, supporting her husband through his cancer journey while managing a high impact career, she began questioning everything she thought she knew about achievement, identity, and purpose. Today, she is the successful founder and CEO of LBB Entertainment, a diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategist, TEDx speaker, author, and community leader. Get ready to explore how she was able to untangle the knots of corporate expectations, navigated one of life's most difficult transitions, and discovered a new definition of success, one that empowers others to own their stories and thrive. Lachandra Baker, welcome to Embrace the Squiggle.
Thank you. Thank you both for having me. Excited to be here.
We are excited to have you.
All right, Lachandra, as usual, we jump in with tell us what did little Lachandra think she was going to be when she grew up, right? What
Oh
did
my
little you
goodness.
think?
Well, I laughed because my nickname were Hollywood, so I thought I was gonna go take the Golden State by storm and be an actor, producer, director extraordinaire. I loved television growing up. That was like my weakness. It's also how my grandma would get me to do my homework because she was like, "You can't watch TV unless you do your homework." And I'm like, "No, don't take my television from me." And so I love everything about storytelling and creating entertainment for people. And so that has been something that I thought, sure, I'm going to do that one day. So, and I did a little bit. So I had a career doing some theater. I did a few independent short films, which was really fun. And now I get to live actually vicariously through my youngest son, who is a filmmaker, went to school for filmmaking and is doing beautiful work now. And I'm a cameo in most of his productions.
So fun, so fun. And as somebody who also as a young child like spent a lot of time on stage and really loved it, doing stuff like this, it's kind of like being on stage, right?
It
You're
is.
you're you're able to kind of speak quickly, keep your lines going. It's
Yeah.
just like acting sometimes.
It is excellent. Yeah, and I tell people I've never met a camera or a microphone and I didn't love. So put me in, coach, and ready to play all the time.
The only difference is you just have a few less people telling you what to do. You get to manage it
Facts.
yourself.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I love that too.
So what took you from the path of going into entertainment, being on stage, being in front of the camera to going into corporate America?
Yeah. So I will be very frank. It was because I had a baby, right? And so having a child will change so much about your life and so much of the direction. And I'm not upset about that by no means because I've raised my beautiful babies. They're grown now, which is wonderful. But I did think that I needed to do to make sure they were secure in their lives. And so I will never regret that by any means, but I always found ways, even being in corporate spaces, to still entertain people and to let people know that storytelling is still one of my favorite mediums. Is how do you get people's voices heard? How do you help them share their stories and know that everybody has a journey that is worth sharing?
I love that, and Colleen and I can absolutely relate to those mama instincts kicking in and taking care of the babies first. So
Absolutely.
we've both been on those journeys. So
For sure. And it's enriched my life in so many ways too. And the beautiful part is everything that I learned about being an entrepreneur, I learned by being in corporate. And now I have two amazing children who grew up being entrepreneurs. They both have their own businesses. They never really worked for anybody else but themselves. So I like to say I created a blueprint for them. So I'm very proud of that.
It's so important for kids to see that, right? For them to actually see and understand what their parents do. There was a whole TikTok series recently of people asking children what their parents do and then their parents coming on and saying what they do. And the perception of kids and what their parents do is it's really cute when they're little, but then as they get older, for them to really understand that and see, and to see you struggle, right? As a mom, there were definitely days that, were really hard at trying to balance the motherhood and work. And I was really open with our kids and saying, this is tough. Like I can't do this because I do have to work. And I have
Yeah.
to work because we would like to feed you on a regular basis. And it would be really nice if you want to go to summer camp, then I have to have a job, right? I can't pay for
Yeah.
summer camp if I don't
Yes.
work. And
Absolutely.
just, for kids to really understand that because I see so many people who get into college, or even my daughter's friends who got to college who had no clue about what the world of work was.
No idea. Yeah, and it's changed so much even from when we were young students, right? For
Oh, yeah.
me, I watched my mom and grandmother work so incredibly hard. My mom was the first person in our family to even go to college. And so before that, it was just kind of a quote unquote pipe dream that no one would ever take, that they would be able to do. A lot of my uncles, they ended up going to the military, for their livelihoods. And my mom was, I would always say, a trailblazer where she went to college. And so she made it very possible for me and my sister to go. And so it was just kind of automatic. My kids knew that they were going to be able to do whatever they wanted to do because of so many sacrifices that was laid down before them. So it is a privilege and an honor to be able to watch the next generation grow and be so strong in their convictions and in their dreams because we did a lot of sacrificing along the way. So I agree with you 100%. I never sugarcoated the journey for my kids. I talked very frank with them and showed them the journey, and so they're stronger for it.
I love that. My husband and I were listening to a podcast the other, I don't know, a week or two ago as we were driving back from one of our kids' college graduations. And I forget which podcast it was. It was a 10-hour drive each way, so we listened to a lot. But the gist of it was talking about how the family dinner table where parents talked about their struggles and the struggles of their parents, their aunts and uncles, that built resilience in kids in a way that kids today aren't getting.
Yes,
Right. That there's the sugar coating to kids to say, oh, kids shouldn't know that, right? Oh, we want them to have the the fairyland childhood where they never hear of anything negative or bad. But
yeah,
then what happens when something goes wrong in their life, they they don't know that they can get through it. Right.
absolutely.
Because
And
it
it
becomes
was
paralyzing for them.
it does. And it was
Mm.
so interesting because my husband and I were listening to this and we were like, yes, yes, yes. Right. Because growing up, right, my guess is both of your grandparents, told you stories that felt like the I walked uphill to school both ways with no shoes, right, in the middle of the
Absolutely.
winter. Right. You
We
always
didn't
heard
have
the
knees. What are you
hardships,
talking about? We couldn't even walk. We had no knees. That was real.
right? Right? And but when we heard those hardships, we heard them say, I did this and look at where I am, right? Like
Yeah.
my
Exactly.
grandfather immigrated from Ireland and family lore, like people were after him in Ireland. Like he was a complete rebel over there and came to the US,
Love it.
you know. And but we heard his stories about how tough life was and how he made it through and look at what he could accomplish. And for kids to not hear those stories, it was such an intriguing kind of take on it, which made me
Yeah.
instantly want to call my kids and tell them some more hard stories. And I know
Yeah.
they've heard them, but I just wanted to tell them even more now, right? To say, here, have we told you these stories about your, ancestors and your aunts and uncles and, all these people? And um, such an interesting
Yes.
take.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we have something in common because my mother's father is half Irish. So my great grandmother was from Ireland as well. So I have African American and Irish heritage, which is so amazing. And talk about resilient, honey. We
Right.
done some things, okay? We've done some things, and so I'm very proud of both
Right.
eras of my heritage in that
Right.
respect for sure.
Right. The Irish side of me is like, I can live if there's no food and we only live with rocks because the potato famine and that
Girl,
was the only thing we could grow. Right. We're like, my
exactly.
genes know that we can handle this.
Exactly. It's a new day. I have never met a potato I did not love, honey, and I lose tenders on hot, sliced, baked, fried, whatever. So yes, I feel you.
Okay, so let's get back to you and your career. So you end up in corporate America
Yes.
and you're doing all so tell us about your kind of corporate career. Give us like the
Yes.
snapshot
Yeah.
of what that looked like.
Yeah, it was so interesting because when I actually went to college, I went to college for hospitality. So I started my career in hotels and restaurants and banquet centers, and that was a thing that I did for many, many years. And I'll always say hospitality is in my blood, but I'm also a Southern girl. I grew up in Georgia, so I grew up with hospitality as a thing. So Southern hospitality is very, very real. And so the way I think about it, I think about hospitality versus customer service. And I tell people that all the time. Like customer service is transactional and hospitality is relational. And I'm always about relationships and building
Ooh.
relationships. And so it always is something that it's driven me. It is the core of who I am. And so once I left hotels, I got into a corporate space and I started working, which is so funny in the 90s, because I'm of age, darling. And we worked
We
for
feel you. We feel you.
I worked for a financial investment company, which was so interesting because back then money literally rained from the skies, right? It was like so many things going on back then. It was right before the dot com, it was right before, Y2K and all those things. And so it was such an interesting way to learn corporate work. And I started doing hospitality, human resources, communications. And so it was really a good upbringing for me to get my feet wet into corporate spaces. And then 9/11 happened. And it was such a shocking space because I was also pregnant with my youngest son. And so it was such a just a confusing time for me. And I started questioning everything back even then. Like, what is this corporate life? What is this world? What are we doing? And so it made me think more of, okay, I need to be really closer to the human side of things. Like, I just need to make sure people are okay. And I've always been an empath anyway. And so that was just part of my life. So I got really into culture. Like, what is the culture of an organization? Are the values more than just what is put on a wall somewhere and is nice, pretty, but do we live by those? And so it became an obsession for me. And so I was just so drawn to employee engagement and culture. And what does it mean to thrive? Not just survive, but to thrive. And so that just took me so far. I was working for several large Fortune 15 companies, and they were highly matrix, which was just a whole nother thing. Let me just tell you, it's a whole nother thing when you're working for large organizations. It's like turning a big ship with a very small rudder when you're trying to get things done. But I really learned, we talked about resilience earlier. I learned resilience. I learned how to create relationships with people across global dynamics, spectrums, all people of all walks of life. And it just enriched who I was. And so when I was actually ready to step out on my own and be an entrepreneur, I literally went back to all my former colleagues and I said, "Hey, I'm hanging my shingle out. Can you find work for me?" And they did. And it was a thriving. Last 6 years have been insanely busy for me, where I actually I was a solopreneur and I got to hire some people, which also made me very happy. And we get to go and we call ourselves edutainment because we educate and entertain at the same time. We teach people how to have an authentic voice, and we teach people that wherever you are, you're enough. And if you're in the room, you belong in the room. So it has been an incredible journey.
I spent a great deal of my career um, on the human resources side in people and culture. I like to call it people and culture, in fact, because to your point around hospitality, I feel like human resources is very transactional and it has gray clouds over it, and
Yep.
people and culture has clear blue skies. Like we, but
Yes.
I was sharing with Colleen a few moments before we started that um, I feel like whenever I was asked questions around the inclusive part of culture, that I, while being an ally, couldn't necessarily be the best representation
Hmm.
of needs. And I would really love to hear your perspective on that and how you do edutain us through the programs and how you help clients, because I feel like that's something that I will always be weak in. It's just
Yes.
by the nature of who I am, I will always be weak in that area. So I would love to learn more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you for standing in the place of an ally, right? Being an ally is so important. I feel like there's so much of any aspect of our life that gives us different levels of privilege, right? I grew up with a lot of love and familial connections, growing up. That's something I have friends who didn't grow up like that. So I'm very
Yeah.
privileged to always have felt loved. I've always been told I could do anything I put my mind to. I've always been affirmed. And so I take that privilege very seriously. So I'm a natural encourager because I had that. I also have a college education. And again, that's a privilege a lot of people don't have. And so when I think about being an ally, I think about where do I get to use my privilege to help amplify other voices. And so that's how I help people. It's like, I don't need to speak for you. I need to clear the path so you can speak for yourself. And I think that's the true job of an ally is that you don't have to save people. People can save themselves, but they need to have access. And so if you have access and opportunity, make sure you're providing that for others as well. We have a saying in my line of work that says nothing about us without us. And that means if you're making decisions about anybody's life or livelihood, they need to be actively involved in that decision making. And so that's what I actually do when I go to organizations. I talk to them about who's in the room, who's not in the room, whose voice is missing. How do we get their voices in the room? And that's a big part of allyship. And I would say, not even just being an ally, being an accomplice. I'm telling you, I'm standing with you. I'm standing right by you. When you need help, I'm there. And so that's a lot of the work that we do is just teaching people how to find opportunities and access and give it to others.
Thank you. That's incredible to hear and to have that level of understanding. I feel like um we don't have those types of discussions enough within the people and culture side of the
Yeah,
organization, yes, but also at the leadership level.
100%.
Because it's something that Colleen and I talk about constantly. And if we could have megaphones to the entire corporate America, we would, but it starts at the top. And
Yes.
so when the executive leadership team, when the board of the organization isn't living that and actioning it, it's not going to happen within the organization. And so, to that point, tell us about some of the challenges you face when you do go into an organization. Share, I think our listeners would really love to hear the challenges and then how you overcome those.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, it all stemmed a lot from what is happening politically and socially in the world is how organizations shift, right? And so I'll tell you when COVID happened in 2020, between COVID and things that happened with the George Floyd situation and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, companies were like, whoa, like we have a real big problem here, not only just with racially, what let me back up. Okay, Lily, take this out in corporate world, not only are we talking about, the racial divide that happened, we're also talking about other levels of neurodiversity, sexual orientation. We're talking about different levels of physical disability, mental disability. All of those things had a spotlight for a while. And then honestly, over the last 16 months or so, people have started shifting and changing yet again. And they don't want to talk about DEI. It's become the boogeyman now. And so what I tell people, I say, first of all, I've been doing this work for a long time. We didn't even call it DEI back then. We called it equal opportunity, we called it affirmative action, we called it equity work. We've always been doing this work. So what I like to tell people is first and foremost, everybody has a lived experience. Everybody has a belief system. Everybody has values that are driving them, whether that's a cultural, ethnicity, nationality, all of those things. If you want a successful company, because let's get down to it, is we talking about capital, right? You're talking about making money. If you want a successful organization, you got to know how to talk to your employees. You got to know what motivates them and inspires them and drives them. But then also you have customers, right? And money is green. I don't care what color anybody else is. You want green money. And so you have to know how to reach people. And with that, you have to understand what is important to them. And so that's honestly what I end up going to organizations about now is saying, whether you want to do it because it's a really good thing to do, because it's the human thing to do, okay, forget about that. Do you want to make money? Okay, let me help you understand how to do that. And I actually create dashboards for folks. And I look at productivity, I look at turnover, I look at onboarding, I look at FMLA when people take leaves. All of those have a dollar value to them. And if you're not treating people well, if you're burning them out, if you're stressing them out, you're not going to have those high numbers. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And so those are some of the major issues that I end up encountering. but I've learned how to speak the language that people need to hear. If you're the CEO, you need a certain thing. If you're the COO, you need a certain thing. If you're the CFO, you need a certain thing. So I've learned how to speak that language of that executive leadership team that will get them to act.
When I hear you say that, Lachandra, I instantly think every entrepreneur in the world needs to hear that line,
Mhm.
right? Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter kind of the why sometimes behind it or what you want to do or how you want to get there. If you want a company to buy your product, you have to prove to them or your services or whatever it is, right? You have to prove to them that this is going to help in the areas that are pain points for them. And
Exactly.
what do pain points equal? As you said, dollars. So
Right.
if you can solve a problem that solves a money issue for them, because
Mhm.
they might, they might not think they have a problem or
Right.
they might not see it as a problem. There are corporations out there that I like 100% refuse to buy from. I think of two of them in particular that are closed on Sundays.
Right.
And so you can all infer probably who I might be talking about here. But those two organizations being, nationwide, they're closed on Sundays. And truthfully, I love that for them. I wish more companies would say, you know what, we're not open a day so our employees can rest. I love the purpose behind that,
Mhm.
but their
Right.
values don't align with my values.
Exactly.
And so
And
then
you speak with your dollars.
I speak with my dollars.
That's right.
But unfortunately, I think not everybody does that.
Yeah.
I think one of those organizations I have purchased from a couple of times in my life because I've been places where it's the only food option,
Right.
right? Where,
Yep.
like, will I purposely go there? No. But if I'm at an airport and there's nowhere the food,
Right.
I've made that decision a couple of times and felt guilty about it sitting there eating food. But, not all consumers have
Yeah. That's
that
right.
kind of values driven piece. But
Yeah. And it's
uh,
so important though. But I'm so glad you have that. But and again, you have choice. And that's what is so important. People always have choice. And sometimes people don't feel like they do. Even in work situations, people like, oh, I hate my job, but I don't have any other option. Yeah, you do. You
Yep.
actually do. You have more power than you actually think you do. But we've been taught that we don't. I'll tell you a
yes.
great example. My mother and father-in-law, and I love them to pieces. They worked the same place for 45 years. And I said, honey, I love that for you. But that's not even reality for us anymore. Because even if we're
No.
doing everything right, we'll get laid off, we'll get downsized, we get shifted around. And they were very fortunate. They had pensions to come out of. We don't have pensions like that anymore in corporate spaces. We don't have that as an entrepreneur, so it's just a different lifestyle. So I confuse them a lot by being who I am and the way I choose to run my business. And they're like, how are you doing this? I'm like, because it's what drives me. And I see, honestly, just we're in a different generation. I'm an Xer, and I love being a Gen X. I teach people all the time, like we're the Jan Brady's of the generations, right? It's always March and March and March. Everybody talks about boomers, people talk about millennials and Gen Z. Nobody talks about us Xers. Like we are the original latchkey kids, the me generation, like honey, hyper independent. Like we don't need
Mm-hmm.
y'all anyway, jokers. And so it's just really funny. Like I think I love talking to other extras because like we just get it. Like we
Yeah.
get the resilience of it, we get the ingenuity of it, we get the innovation of it, and we do what we need to do to make it work.
Well, I think of just our childhoods as Gen Xers, right? There are days. I mean, my parents had no idea where I was. Like they thought. I mean,
Exactly.
they knew generally where I was, right? Like it wasn't like they were, bad parents. But I'd be, yeah, I'm grabbing my bike. Lynn and I are going to go for a bike ride.
Yep.
We'd go ride our bikes for hours.
I
Yeah.
actually
Hours.
had the rule. My mom gave me the actual rule that is joked about, but when the street lights
Streetlights
came
come
on
on.
in the
Yeah.
neighborhood, I had to be home.
Yep.
Exactly. And sometimes you hit that driveway right at the turns on, you're like,
You're like,
That's
"Oh,
right.
yeah,
We started to learn how to read the sun, when it
yeah."
was going down.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Speaking of that clock, honey, we knew exactly what we were doing.
That's right.
And it is interesting because, when I am coaching folks around their careers, I get a lot of people who come to me. One of the first things I do for everyone is have them do Gallup Clifton Strengths, figure out,
Hmm.
how do they like to approach things? And then we do a values assessment, right? What's important to you? And so many of the younger folks come back and say security. I want a job that is secure. I want a job where I am not going to get laid off. And I want that job to be remote and to pay me a ridiculous amount of money. But like take those aside. But the security piece
Yeah.
has been so important because, our generation, we were the first generation to bounce jobs. I remember
Yep.
quitting my first job out of college. I worked there for 2 years, and it was the type of job where most people didn't last a year. So 2 years, I was senior by a lot. Like our team had 23 people. There was only one person who had been there longer than me on my team of
Yep.
23 at two
Yep.
years. And I remember quitting my job and not feeling bad about quitting. Interviewing was fine. All that stuff was fine. The hardest part, calling my dad and telling him that I was switching jobs,
Yep.
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Because that generation of we only have one job, right?
Yep.
From when we,
Yep.
go in the workforce till we die or retire.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
And my dad is still, but FYI, in the same job that he was in when I was growing up, even to this day with the same company. So so I can totally relate to that.
Yeah.
And now there are organizations that look at a resume of someone who was in the same job for 20 years and
Yep.
then they actually turn it down because you haven't worked in multiple environments, so we don't know if you can work in this environment now because you've been in the same place for 20 years. So it's been a complete 180 shift, in fact,
Yeah.
around that mentality.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even you talk to different recruiters, like I remember back in the day, they wanted your resume on one page. I'm like, girl, I've been working for over almost 3 years now. One page, you're not even gonna get to know anything about me. Then now, okay, now it's like 3 pages, okay, 4 pages. I'm like, okay, what is it? Because that's the thing. If you've had multiple jobs, you might have had a different set of skills. And then that's the other thing, chronological versus skill based, right? So there's all these different ways. So the young people are super confused because they like, what do I need to actually do to get the job and get the security that you're talking about? Because I think security for them is I get a paycheck twice a month or every the 15th and the 31st or whatever. That's the security they want. It's not the job itself. It's just like I just need to know I'm gonna get paid. And I think the environment in which they're getting paid is what is shifting in front of them. And that is what makes them feel like, okay, what am I actually doing with my life? Actually ask myself that sometimes. What am I doing with my life? you know,
I
but
think
we've
we all
reinvented
do.
ourselves so many times, right? I always say there was used to be a show many years ago on Yahoo, which is so funny because no one talks about Yahoo anymore. But it was called Second Acts, and it was always talking about
Yes.
these people. Do you remember that? Thank you
Yes.
for somebody else remembering besides me. But it was so cool because these people were like in their 40s and 50s and 60s changing careers and saying, you know what, I did this for the first half of my life. Now I do something else. It was such a fascinating show. I loved it.
I
And
loved
that's
it.
how I feel about myself.
So my favorite episode of that was it was a woman who was a corporate lawyer, like full-fledged, business suit every day, probably Navy only business suit every day, like super, super corporate lawyer who ends up quitting her job and opens a ballroom dancing studio.
Love that.
Right? It was, you would never, ever, ever, ever kind of connect those two.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. I mean, there was a wonderful woman, and I don't know if you remember the story. Her name was Nola Oakes, and I would never forget about her. She, at 95 years old, went and got her college degree. I'm like,
yes, yes.
clearly, she is not going to join some corporate thing. She just wanted to do it. And I'm like, you go, girl. You go do something for yourself. And I think that is so beautiful. You don't have to answer to anybody. It's just what's driving you. Do it. 100% do it.
Lachandra, as we head into a fun segment we like to do with rapid fire questions, as we like lead into that, I do have one last question that will help us kind of segue in there. What is one thing, based on all of the work that you do and the interactions that you have with so many various environments, what is one general thing that you feel like you would change based on all the experience
Mhm.
you've had? You go into an organization, what is the one
Yeah.
thing that you're like, oh, if people just realize they change this one thing, it could make such an impact?
Yeah, people thinking leadership is just a title. Leadership starts from within, and leadership can be you leading yourself even. It doesn't have to be a title. And so I wish more people thought of themselves as leaders and took the initiative to say, my voice matters and what I have to say matters because I'm the closest to this product. I'm the closest to this service. I understand what our clients need. I understand what my employee group around me need. I have a voice that matters. And so I wish more people would utilize their voices and understand that about themselves, that you don't just need a title to be a leader. You are a leader just by being in the room and being able to have your voice heard.
The amount of times today I wish we had the little Zoom meeting applause claps that I could have sent up on my screen. I think you've shared so many incredible tips and experiences, and I feel like Colleen and I could talk to you for hours. And so we do have to head into our rapid fire question segment, but you are fabulous, and I
Thank
love the
you.
work that you do.
You
So,
both are too. I'm so excited to be here with you all. Thank you so much.
so we have to know: are you a coffee or tea person?
I'm both. Coffee in the morning, tea in the evening.
Ooh, good one. So does that mean that you are an early bird or like a night owl?
Both.
Do you sleep?
Now that's the magic question that I think I do. I would tell people my brain is ambidextrous, so I do a lot of different things, kind of depending on where my energy switch and shifts. So, like weekends, I'm definitely a night owl, and then the weekdays, I'm an early bird. So yeah, I have both of those things that are very resonant for me.
How would your friends describe you versus how your clients would describe you?
Oh, that's such a good question. My friends would always say I am larger than life. And I love that because that is me. When I walk into a room, yeah, no, I'm in the room. But I would say my client probably say the same thing about me. But I think the client would say she really listens and she really knows how to help us because you can't help somebody if you don't understand what they're actually going through. And so I have perfected being a good listener. And so that's important to me.
That should be important to everyone, in fact. What is one piece of advice you wish you had ignored?
Ooh, telling
Good
me that
good
my
question,
style
Ash.
that's a great question. My style of leadership is not good enough. I got told many, many moons ago when I first got into corporate that I didn't have executive presence because I smiled too much and I was too nice. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I mean, it was really that was the idea that to be a leader, you had to be stern and you had to be serious all the time and you had to do this. And I'm like, that is not me. That is not me. I love people and I love to laugh more than anything in the world. So yes, I'm always gonna come in with a jovial attitude. That's just who I am.
Yes. Well, rapid fire is not about me. I would just say that I was once told that I needed in a coaching session, I needed to learn how to have a presence more like a man so that I would be respected as a leader. So I can totally understand where you're coming from. And
Uh-huh.
just, there is nothing masculine about me. So
Yeah,
that would be a really tough challenge.
right. Exactly. And authentic leadership means everything. So I'm glad you didn't
Mhm.
follow that advice either.
That's it. So we love to share with our squigglers what our guests love to read. Do you have a book that you would like to share with everyone? And it doesn't have to be a professional book. It can also be a fantasy book, something that takes you out of your workday.
Yes. One of my favorite books and I've read it so many times is Bell Hooks All About Love. And it means so much to me because again, I'm in the human business, right? I'm in about human centered work, and so when I think about love and how love, all we need is love. Love is all we need. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but I feel like if we actually led with love, the world would be a much better place.
is where we mic drop.
You both are so much fun. I just love you. I just think the world of you, what you're doing. Thank you for having a great podcast and talking about that squiggle, because there's nothing linear in my life. And so I love having this squiggle conversation, because that's what it's all about. Finding your joy, finding your purpose, and making it work.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Lachandra. Where can our guests find you? So if folks want to like reach out, bring you into their company, learn more about what you do, what's the best place? And we have it all linked in our show notes as
Yes,
well.
yes, yeah. My friends say I stay outside, so I'm all over the World Wide Web, as you say. So all the socials, and then you can go to my website too, which is lbbedutainment.com. Would love to talk to anybody who wants to see their culture thrive and to see the people in their company thrive.
Thank you so much. And we hope that everyone has a fantastic day and has an opportunity to squiggle into something better this week.